We often assume that philanthropic foundations are all about choosing projects, but behind the scenes, it's often about choosing people. In this episode of our miniseries, How Texans Give, we go behind the curtain of philanthropic foundations to see how decisions are really made, how trust is built, and how vision moves from paper to impact. My guest is Dr. Victoria Sarvadi, who, together with her husband, runs the Nathaniel Foundation. What she shares is so insightful. How foundations evaluate ideas, how systems matter, and how they're powered by real people, and why some people and visions get funded the first time around and others do not. This conversation isn't about the pitch decks, it's about the people. Let's jump in to my on-site conversation with Dr. Victoria Sarvadi. Victoria, thank you so much for welcoming me into your home and your beautiful home. And you get the holiday spirit here. Everything's all decorated and you're ready to go. This trip of mine through Texas has been amazing. I've met amazing people, and I've really had the opportunity to meet you again after having known you kind of on and off for a number of years already.
Yes.
Victoria, you're not just you have the Nathaniel Foundation.
That's
and
right.
If you could tell us a little bit about the foundation and what you like to focus on.
Sure. Well, Avi, you're welcome anytime
Thank you.
to come and visit. The Nathaniel Foundation is the baby, I think, of our giving heart. It's the heart my husband and I have for just giving back. You know, we've been so blessed. The Lord has just He's given us so much opportunity to help, and He's given us a lot of means in order to do it, and we feel responsible. We feel accountable for the blessings that the Lord has given us, and so we want to give back. And the Nathaniel Foundation has been that vehicle to help us fulfill that. And we actually entertain or consider many different grant requests from various organizations, whether they're Christian or they're Jewish. Sometimes it's just an organization that wants to make a difference in the lives of others and doesn't have a religious affiliation. And we look at each one of those things, each one of those projects, and we really determine the heart of that ministry, the heart of the person that has the vision for it. And we come alongside and try to be a helpmate for that particular organization. So it's been a blessing for us to be able to do so many different projects here in the United States, locally even, and of course into Israel and even maybe more into other countries as well.
So maybe let's start locally, because I love what you've said about how you really have this reach into different communities and different kinds of projects. You mentioned Jewish, Christian, and other, and perhaps more general. I'm Jewish, and we have a teaching in a Jewish tradition that the poor of your community come first. Why don't you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, it's a mandate for us to take care of the orphans and the widows and the poor. And so we have a lot of that in our own backyard. And, we look to see how we can benefit the homeless. One of the greatest organizations is Operation Care right here in the Dallas area. Susie Jennings. And we really feel a heart for what she does. And we want to bless it. We want to encourage it and to support it. And I think Dallas is one of the most homeless communities there is in the whole country. And so we have a lot of homeless and a lot of poor, and Susie's right there to help she gets her hands dirty. She gets in the middle of it. You know, she goes to those places where they're all living under the bridges and giving them blankets and things of that nature. But she also has this great big convention every year where she invites the homeless and the poor to come, and she has everything from a petting zoo to Santa Claus and Christmas trees and all those kind of things. And the children, they just have their eyes are full of wonder. They're very excited. And of course, she gives with shoes and coats and hygiene, eyeglasses. I mean, there's people there to give haircuts. And if you want to go home, they give you a bus ticket to go home. So it's an incredible vision. And of course, we do support that right here in our own hometown.
That's amazing to really, like you say, roll up your sleeves and understand what the needs are. The bus ticket, what happens if somebody can come to the convention, but they can't get home?
Right.
And just to be attuned to that. And Susie's an exceptional individual. I've had the opportunity of doing a project with Susie. In fact, I remember, and this is maybe to what you're speaking about, already going beyond the local. As someone at the time, I represented the city of Ariel, and she came and said she wants to do, kind of a project with some distribution and things like that. We said, we're really not focused on that right now. We'd just love for you to see what's happening in Israel today. And so she stepped in. By the time the visit was over, instead of, doing a project of handing out some backpacks, she said, forget the backpacks, we want to help you build a school. And so just seeing what's next. And I remember she asked the mayor, what's your biggest need? He said, I'm building a school. Well, let's help you build a school.
Well, that's not uncommon for her too, because she'll go into third world countries and build the brick and mortar schools for, the very poor children. And at the same time, give the backpacks away, socks and, and shoes and coats or whatever needs that the kids may have. That has always been her focus. So coming into Israel, which is not a third world country, and having to adjust that, she easily was able to say, you know what, these kids deserve a good quality school in Judea and Samaria, some of these places that, maybe don't have the same as like Jerusalem or Haifa or Tel Aviv. So this was a great project for her, and we came alongside that, and we were willing to help as well.
Well, I think it's also somewhat modest of you to say you came alongside that, because obviously you understand what's going on with her projects and her works, but you said earlier this kind of responsibility. How does the sense of responsibility that you have for, if you will, stewarding your resources connect with a wonderful person like Susie or other projects that you do where you see the need and you step in and close that gap?
Well, Avi, I am a Bible teacher. I'm a prophecy teacher. I teach Christians not just the Word of God, but really what we can look forward to in the future whenever Messiah comes back. And I know that there's a judgment. Everybody goes through a judgment, and I think God will look at what He's giving you to see how good a steward you were, and if you were accountable. And then there's rewards that are given. So, I have this more of ethereal, spiritual look on this that really guides and governs why we do what we do. Of course, it is a blessing, and it blesses our heart to see people affected and positively affected, and they're happy and excited. That's a blessing too. But I'm looking in the long run, and I think we all have that responsibility. We will all be held accountable. And so, into much is given, much is required. And so we feel like we need to do whatever we can to give back.
So I want to ask you in a moment about, you talked about the different projects and maybe how you prioritize different projects. But before that, I just do want to hang on that note for a second, because I think my experiences now on this trip through Texas, met with a number of people, Christian, who believe that they see their giving through the lens of a mandate, of a divine mandate. And at the same time, it's very, very real. When you put your hand into your pocketbook or you write out a check, whatever that may be, it's not in the realm of the spiritual that's sort of distant from the day-to-day. It's very, very real. You spend that money on investing in a project, it's instead of investing in something else. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Well, there's a principle in the scripture of a tithe, and 10% of what is given to you in a paycheck, or any type of resource that comes through. Sometimes it's the sale of property or whatever it is. I feel like we owe it to our society. We owe it to others that aren't in the same position to give back to the economy. God requires us to give to the poor. He requires us to give to those in need. And he, when he says to pray for, that your needs would be met, you've got, a rabbi here or a pastor there or some type of ministry leader on their knees praying and asking for God to help fulfill their needs of their ministry, whether it's to put a new roof on, or whether it's a project of outreach to bring people to the land or tours or whatever it is. It all costs money, and they're praying and they're asking God. And just as God is answering prayers, He's putting it on the hearts of those who have those means and resources to give to these. We say God owns 1,000 cattle, 1,000 hills. And so we're just asking Him to sell one or two so that we can get the job done, right? That's a lot of people use that little saying, but it's true. He puts it on the hearts of those that He has given means to, and it could be just that paycheck. That's your means, and 10% of it belongs to Him. This is very important to understand, that God gives us the ability, the energy, the insight, the gifts, He instills in us all kinds of different special gifts that nobody else maybe has. And he gives those to us for a reason, and that is so that He can use those gifts for the betterment of His world. And so sometimes He calls us and our gifts to help somebody over here that is asking Him for help, and we all help one another. And so your paycheck, 10% of it is spiritual. 10% of it belongs to Him. That's what He says. The tithe is mine. And so if I try to spend spiritual money, I am actually putting myself in debt because it's not physical for me to use it in such a way.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about the tithe, and really the tithe is designated. Uh-huh. And in a moment, I want to figure out how you designate, how you figure out where it goes. But it's important to know that the tithe isn't something that you've kind of set aside and just said, okay, well, we'll just spend that perhaps with less attention than we spend other money. You're actually very intentional. We spoke a little bit about before about how you're very thoughtful and considerate, and it's a team meeting. There's a board of directors that's going to make a decision about what project to give to and what not to. And I think if we could just stop there for a moment and say, you know what, if our philanthropic investments were taken as seriously as our capital investments, then there'd be a lot more good being done a lot better.
Right.
How do you go about deciding where the tithe goes?
Well, again, a priority. I mean, if your gas grill on the patio is not working, that's important that you fix it. But if the oven in your kitchen's not working, that's more important. So you have to decide, if, you only have so much money to spend, where does it need to go? And so we take a look at all the different needs that are submitted to our foundation, and we're able to determine through a consensus of a board which ones really speak to us as necessary and are something that's very time sensitive that we need to take care of. Pressing, yeah. And so we look at it that way. And then sometimes certain ideas or projects that come to us really don't match with our mission. And so we're able to eliminate those or put those at least on the back burner for now, because there's others that really do connect. And but I just talking about the tithe, and our foundation, of course, is everything that comes in goes out. We don't there's very little that is used for our own administrative expenses. We just have one person that actually gets paid a salary, and it's not that much, so 90-something%, 99%, 98% goes out to where it needs to go. And we feel like that's really important to do that. We have projects, like I said, we actually go into projects that are that help the family in the area of not only education, but even entertainment. We fund plays and music, operas that are solid, they're wholesome, something that you can have your 7-year-old sit next to you and feel very confident that, we're pouring into them culture and beauty, but it's not smut. It's not, something that you'd be embarrassed about. So we have a performing arts center that we actually support. This is something that we give endowments to, and we think it's important. There's what's out there right now for entertainment is kind of scary that your kids can see just about anything that they want to see. They can bring it up on the internet, and it's used to you could kind of know that your kids are going to be safe, but they're not safe anymore. There's predators out there. There's X-rated things, and it's right there in front of them for your young your little toddler to see if they wanted to. And believe me, they know how to work those electronics. That's right.
So in that world, you're basically, on the one hand, you obviously recognize the value of culture.
Mm-hmm. Culture is important.
And at the same time, you want to create the greater quality of that culture.
Yes, and we want to understand. People need to understand that there is a God. That's one of the first things that they need to understand. So sometimes we have these projects that are very, I would call them on the lower level of just getting people in the door. And then we have greater projects that are, are wonderful, that bring a lot of education to the Christians and Jews. We're using a lot of the Jewish community to teach the Christians in the area of Torah. And that's a kind of a place where we've been lacking a lot. And it's been quite a blessing to see the two come together, bridge together in cooperation, pray together, study together. That's a new thing. God's doing a new thing, and he's bringing his two, I call them two camps. He's got two camps, and he's bringing them together. And
so you really are at the forefront, a lot of this dialogue between the different communities, between the different faith communities.
Yeah, we are. Mm-hmm.
And that's an entire dynamic in and of itself. And so if I try to piece it all together, the Nathaniel Foundation is focusing, first of all, on different geographies, and then, if you will, perhaps different tiers. Like you spoke before, maybe like an entry level. And for what it's worth, even this podcast of You Are What You Give is focusing on giving in the most non-denominational sense of it's not just Christians and Jews or people specifically of a faith orientation. If you see beyond yourself because you give, or you give because you see beyond yourself, that for me, it's the same idea. It's whether you're professing a particular faith or quoting a scripture, you are not about you. Certainly not exclusively about you. And you have a role to play. You have a purpose. And that already has value, period. I don't care what faith community you come from. But then you take it already to another tier. And you say, okay, there's specific communities, you obviously come with your own faith, your own understanding, the depth that comes with that, and the search for more. And that's brought you to building additional bridges and creating this kind of interfaith language that many people are kind of wondering about, but haven't ventured into. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, we learned so much about what the needs are out there by connecting to all these different people, the Jewish community, the Christian community as well. Really, the Christian community that is wanting to connect to the Jewish community. That's where we kind of find ourselves, staying in that lane a lot. We find that there is a need, like for instance, there's a Jewish organization that takes upon one of their projects is to make wells for the poor in Africa.
Yes.
And so when we see it's actually Ethiopia, and there's a lot of Jewish poor there, and they don't have water. And so we feel like it's very important that, we supply the water. And it's not just for the Jewish people, it's also for the Christians that are there as well. But this Jewish organization has made us aware of it. And so it's like, well, we need to go and do something there. My heart is really to connect in those practical needs where people, they just don't even have water or clean water. They walk miles to get it. That's something that tugs at my heartstrings. And we just feel like as we look at the different needs, there are some that just scream louder than others. And I think that everybody has to take that in their own heart and realize that, this is something that is really connecting to me. I mean, we, as far as the Nathaniel Foundation is concerned, we're like a United Way. We take in all of the donations, and it's a 501c3, so it's tax deductible. But we're a 409A, I think it is, which means that we have to give it all away. We can't keep any there. So it funnels into all the different projects that that come across our desk, and we're able to help the whole world in that regard. And so people can give their gifts to the Nathaniel Foundation and know it's going to go to a good cause. And we try to keep it to where it doesn't get political, or it doesn't get to a point where, well, I can't agree with that, because it's all about the good of the people and the good of the land and the glory to God.
You talked about the different priorities, and they range geographically, also in terms of certain kind of intensity with from a faith perspective or otherwise, but you can't do everything. And I want to ask a hard question. Sometimes when you have to say, this is not for now, you spoke about the most pressing needs at this time. Maybe someone else is on the other side of the screen is wondering, how do you say no to people? Because I know a lot of people who have great difficulty even asking for a gift. But on the other side of that, there's the other difficulty of saying, we just can't help you right now.
Right. Well, we have to say that often. And, if it's a particular project that I know will probably eventually get funded, I tell them, just keep on applying, and when the time comes, I know that this will get the attention of a lot of people, or people at least in our foundation, our board. So, and then other times, I'll just, sometimes we personally give something, from our own personal finances.
Just to make it happen.
Just to make it happen. Maybe the board didn't agree with us on a particular need, so, we'll do it ourselves. And then there's other times whenever I'll just pray with them, but, and apologize. But, it's a hard thing. You're right. It's a hard question. It's a hard thing to do. But and everybody thinks their project is important. I know that. And many people have their heartstrings attached to those projects. And many times my heartstrings are tied right there with them,
right.
So we all have our it's in our board, there's different people have different connections and different heartstrings. And so we reason among ourselves and with each other. But what we know for sure, we all love Israel and we all want to help. And so that seems to be a common theme with us. And we also want to help the poor and all the humanitarian needs that are out there.
And there's so many.
And so I would say those are the two main things. Of course, you mentioned culture. That's important as well, but it's not as important. But, there are times whenever we feel it's necessary. Otherwise, we see our whole society going down the hill,
Right. Well, that's the breadth and depth of it, right?
Yeah.
You've got to create these opportunities at the more basic level, because that preconditions people or gives them the tools to appreciate more perhaps refined elements of the conversation as it follows. Before the camera started rolling, you also talked about sometimes where you might have a conversation with a person and you're not even sure that their heart is in the project.
Yeah.
You've been at this for so long. How can you sense that?
Well, a lot of times they know it's a foundation and there's money and let me see, what can I ask for? I need, what kind of project and you can just tell that they're just trying to get some type of funds for something. And a lot of times it's for administrative, it needs. But it's we're a project, oriented foundation. And so we are looking for, things that will surely make a difference when it's initiated. Not so much, that they can keep the lights on. That's important, but that's, that should come from their donor base. It's a different kind of animal whenever you start, going into project-oriented missions.
You want to look at the outcomes, and see what's going to come from the gift.
Exactly.
And then I wanted to touch upon also the different heartstrings of the different folks on the board. And that's always difficult to manage in and of itself. You spoke about the common themes, I will just add, in my experience, there is no such thing as the right project or the best project or the most important project. It's what you said before, because every single person, not the person who's looking for an opportunity, the person who is committed to their project and their heart is in it, that is the most important project in the world. Nothing else matters. Yeah. And you can see that in a person.
Exactly.
And for them, it really is the most important project. And then we get to a different space, which is, what's the right match for you, the foundation, with the given projects? And we talked about you have this stewarding of your resources. You're meant to support certain things, and other people are meant to support other things.
Right.
Right? All of the resources are out there. There's enough means to make everything that has to happen. But there's not always going to be a good match, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think what happens is in our particular situation, a person, they have to have a sponsor that's on the board. And so the way it works is you sit down with the sponsor and you convey and you try to help that sponsor understand your heart and your vision. And hopefully that sponsor will catch it and be able to take it back to the board. It's just a matter of connecting and seeing the need and seeing the passion that's in the project and the person that's initiating it. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for passion. We're looking for drive. We're looking for vision. And because they're the ones that are going to get it done. Those who just are kind of throwing some ideas out there, not so much. We can do that ourselves.
I think there's really two important insights for the people who are asking in what you just said, and not just for your foundation, everywhere. One of them is the passion piece. If you're not electrified about your project, it's not going to be conveyed. But there's another challenge, which is the communication challenge, which is even when you're electrified about it, in your case, I love this system because through the sponsor is going to need to communicate it back to the board.
Exactly.
Now, the sponsor got the electrifying experience with the individual or the nonprofit, whatever it is. They have that. But that's going to be harder for them to communicate. The person who's making the ask in the first place has to have the communication abilities to clearly articulate what it is that they're trying to put out there. Because if that can't be transmitted to the sponsor won't be able to bring it back to the board.
Yeah. And we have very passionate board meetings. Sometimes people are crying,
Wow.
And others are saying, wow, this is very important. I feel the touch of the Spirit on this project. And then other times it's like, I just don't feel like this is right. And it will be a consensus and we'll just table it. But we'll say, but maybe later. So we'll always, determine whether it's something, because a lot of times on these really big projects that, need hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to complete, you may not be able to help with all of it, but you see that, we can do some now just to let them know we're interested and then tell them to reapply because we want to see this project through, and it may be, some time before we can get there. So
I love how you leave that door open. It's hard to close the door, but also you don't really want to close the door.
There are many times we don't. And like I said, there's other times whenever we say we just don't feel like this is, meeting our mission and our vision. But, we pray with them and just say, we're sorry. But, I would say for the most part, we try to keep those communication doors open. And in fact, I've even said to some before, we really love you and your ministry. Let us know if another project comes up, that will be more, connect more.
More in line.
More in line.
Yeah, it really is that matching and finding the language of the needs, meeting the means in such a way that everyone's aligned. So I do have one more question.
Okay.
And it may become more than one question, but I want to focus on one more question, which is, with all of this experience in giving and meeting the needs of the community, have you ever thought if you could do something to give even a little bit better? When we spoke about the kosher giving book that I wrote at the beginning of the war, and I'm not promoting the book. I'm really, really not.
There's an opportunity to do it.
Yeah, no. The audience is aware of the book. But the idea is, could we give more meaningfully, more mindfully, or more measurably? Are there elements of our giving where we could step it up? Because at the beginning of the October 7th war, everyone wanted to give, and maybe they were less selective. They asked fewer questions.
You're right.
But then we're at a different phase right now. We're in a different season, and we're asking questions that should be asked all the way through. Mm-hmm. Maybe now there's more time to answer those questions. It's not the same degree of urgency by far.
Right.
And therefore we can start asking those questions. And the questions are, on the one hand, they're questions that are posed to the person who's making the ask, the recipient, this expectation of, well, what's going to be the outcome of the gift? But we can also ask ourselves the questions that you're always asking yourself as a board. What are we going to prioritize? How much can we allocate, et cetera, et cetera? Is there anything in those processes where you'd like to say, you know what, maybe in this next season of giving, we want to do this a little bit better?
Well, I know that what we do is, we kind of vet a bit more, I think, than maybe some foundations do. On a personal level, we sit down, just like you and I are sitting down and had a conversation today and just visited. We will do that with a lot of the different applicants that are asking for funds, and have coffee with them, get to know them, because one of the main things that I think is important is to trust and to have that sense of, camaraderie and trust at the same time, where we kind of are on the same wavelength. And I know that they're gonna do something good and something right. I don't have to worry about, giving funds to someone that is going to squander them or be irresponsible. So it's very important, I think, to vet and to learn to trust and have a relationship with everyone that actually sends in a grant request. Can't do that with everyone that's far off, far away, and people in Israel or in another state or whatever. But phone calls and Zoom calls have become a norm.
Use the technology.
Yeah, use the technology so that we can, and give us information about who you are and what you do, and let us see, what's going on behind the scenes. We want to get to know people. When we go to Israel, we actually go into the homes of a lot of our friends, and we have Shabbat dinner with them, or just visit, having coffee on the patio, or meeting them for lunch somewhere. That is really important to do, and it's not just a business relationship, but it becomes a friendship, and so that's what I think are really aiming for more of in our foundation.
So anyone and everyone who's listening, whether they're the foundation or the person asking from the foundation for support, and I speak of any and every foundation, what you just said about relationship and trust, it's the ABCs. You can do things short term before you have those.
Yeah.
But as you've learned over time, obviously you need to do more of that. And it's just amazing that you've spent the time to do that, because we can know that it's true without investing the time in doing it.
Okay,
and I actually think that that's another form of your giving.
Mm-hmm.
I sense that this question might lead to another one. And so just to kind of fill in the blanks here a little bit, in that relationships are, two ways, right?
Right.
How have you been enriched by those relationships?
Well, I think just having this conversation with you, Avi, is really, enriching. It fulfills something, I think, maybe in both of us, where we realize there's reconciliation among, the like I said, the two camps, where we consider ourselves to be God's people, and you consider yourselves to be God's people too. Yet, how can there be a separation and division if we're both God's people? So what I'm finding is, what's really exciting is to find our commonalities and to capitalize on those commonalities, and to enrich it and find ways where we can do things together. And we don't have to agree on everything to love each other, and to love one another. So I've got family members. I don't agree with everything with my family members.
I think that's a requirement. You have to make sure not to agree.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, everything. But I do love them.
Yes.
So, and that's kind of how you have to look at it. So it's
that's really. I love profound simplicity. You don't have to go too high. On the one hand, we don't have to agree. We don't have to be the same.
Right.
And on the other hand, through that mutual respect, to build a strong, meaningful relationship. And again, it gets back to that same trust. I know lots of folks who don't want to, pardon the terminology, they don't want to touch a Christian with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
There's, there's history, there's a lack of understanding, there's something that's very, very, very opaque. But when you sit down with somebody for a cup of coffee and you begin to understand that they're really genuine, they're genuine in the things that they agree with you about, and they're genuine in the things that they don't agree with you about, then you can have a conversation.
Yeah.
If you kind of like pretend, oh, we're all the same, or oh, we're so very different we can't even have a conversation, then things aren't going to come together. The reality is people are in conversation. And I say this not only for Christians and Jews, I say this from a perspective of giving. Giving is a relationship by definition, right?
Absolutely.
Oftentimes people don't have the relationship the way that you do that. They do just write a check. But when you're going to have a relationship and you're going to cultivate that relationship, so much comes out of that.
Well, I think it's a covenantal relationship, because it's we are coming together and finding out what the needs are for one another. And it's not just the foundation helping somebody with their financial need. It's the other person coming back and saying, hey, I want to just bless you. I want to just have coffee with you and have lunch with you. That relationship is a blessing that reciprocates. And, it not only makes you feel appreciated, but it makes you feel like you're a part of the family. And, it's a deeper connection. And so creating relationships is I think, essential in this world and in our lives. And what can we give? What can we receive? Is a question I think that we all should ask one another, because there's so much for each one of us to give, and there's so much you have that I can receive as well in my life. So it goes back and forth. Like I said, it's reciprocal.
It is reciprocal, and it's just again the profound simplicity of just being in that kind of a conversation, and the conversation continues to unfold. As you said, you come to Israel. You're involved with so many different organizations and so many kinds of, really, some of the people who I know who have been in touch with you, and you've touched their lives, and obviously, again, it reciprocates. I think if there's a lesson here, and there's so many, but if there's a lesson here about how a relationship can build beyond the transactional element, it's here. There's going to be the project, and the project is going to be funded to one extent or another. The project will move forward, but there's people involved in that project. Yep. And as you indicated before, people are social animals, okay? And so there's things that are happening to people in people's lives that take on these additional dimensions that's way beyond the paycheck. Pardon, it's way beyond the charitable check. It's just a reality. And I love how you started with the story of Susie, and how she rolls up her sleeves to get really involved with people. When you have that interaction, that personal interaction with people, that's immeasurable. Right. You don't know what you're doing with a person in their life, and the way that they reciprocate similarly.
And I think that you, as a Jew, appreciates what Susie does, because she's helping the poor. And, that's blessing the Lord. It's blessing the people who don't have means. And so you can appreciate that. And you can tell Susie, I love what you're doing, and kudos to you. And have that support, at least in just a conversation, where she can feel uplifted and encouraged. And the same with us with many of the Jewish projects. We feel like they do so much good for, humanitarian. There's so many humanitarian reasons to help Israel right now. I know after you mentioned about after October 7th, and we immediately started. We didn't ask a lot of questions. A ministry would say, I've got this, and this, and here's the check. We knew that there were needs. We weren't really worried and concerned about all the ins and outs and the intricacies there. But now it gets now that things have settled down, we're paying more attention to that. So you're right. A lot of it has to do with the urgency of the hour. But a lot of times it's because the reason we were able to do that is because we have a relationship with those people, and we can trust them. And we can just give them a large check and say, just do what needs to be done right now. You decide. It doesn't have to be a specific project that we approve. But
that's amazing.
yeah.
Stepping into that time of need, but again, predicated upon the relationship that you already had previously. Also that point about how, everyone's going to give in the way that they're supposed to be giving. And so we can appreciate and celebrate what the other person's doing, because I can't do everything. Everyone's got to do their part.
Right.
And I have a simple formula, and I call it give more than you take, right?
Of course.
If everyone would give more than they took, then the net gain is, the
some
world
left over.
is just in a better place, right?
Exactly.
It's if we just give more than we take. Thank you so much, Victoria. You give clearly more than you're taking. It's just a pleasure to hear from your personal perspective and figure out how that foundation aspect worked as somebody in the foundation, you and your husband, and working with the board, figuring out how do we prioritize, how do we serve as really a source of blessing for our community and way beyond. You're involved in all these conversations. They continue to grow.
That's right.
Thank you so much for everything that you do.
It's a joy
and
a privilege.
Thank you for this conversation, which is, of course, another way that you give.
Yeah, we are very welcome.
One quick question, and I know I said the end of the questions, but this is important. If people want to find out about the Nathaniel Foundation, perhaps contribute in their own way, how can they find you?
You can go to the nathanielfoundation.org, and you'll find us on the internet. And we take every single, if you have a specific project you'd like to give into or a specific ministry, you just write that on your check, or on the website. There's some drop-down menus. You can choose different ministries that you want to give it to, or you can write it in. As long as it's a 501c3, we can give to any ministry, and we'll make sure that it gets to every bit of it that you give will go to that particular organization. It's very important for us to just be the one that, facilitates. And all of the ministries are vetted, like I said before, so we can trust the ministries that are listed on our website. And so it's a real plus, I think. A lot of people just don't know where to give, and they think, oh, if I give this money, especially after October 7th, there were so many people out there
100%.
fishing for money and scams, and really wasn't, there were a lot of them that were dishonest.
It leaves a sour taste in people's mouths.
Yes.
They don't want to give next time.
Right.
And then, we started with you give to your community, which is great. But if you wanted to give beyond and you don't know, you don't have the tools, you're not the foundation, you're not having the conversations and vetting the next person across the, across the on the other side of the table.
Exactly.
So who's going to do that for you? So you're really stepping into that role and doing it on behalf of all of the other beneficiaries and benefactors, kind of creating that bridge.
And we look at a lot of the finances, or we kind of hold them accountable, for what they're doing. And there are times whenever we've asked for the finances, and most of the time everything has been kosher, as you would say. But it's very important to know and have that security and that relief or that peace. And knowing that what you're giving is going to where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, and I do think this is another, just for what it's worth. I'm a big believer in the reporting that comes from the recipient. It's something that it's not a nice to have. It is, in my mind, it's a requirement of the recipient to be sharing with
and most
the
of
person,
them do,
even if they're not asked to do so.
Right.
You've received a gift. You know that you've done a great job with that. Why shouldn't the person who's giving to you got the satisfaction that the outcome is coming to fruition?
Yeah.
Now, I know the nonprofits, they're busy, they're running around, and they're always, understaffed and overworked, and they don't get around to it. I understand. But I do think it is their responsibility, and I think you should be asking for that kind of feedback, and like you say, normally people will give it to you because
they do. They usually do.
Yeah, and sometimes they need to be reminded, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, yes. And we haven't had anybody that we have turned away because of that. So
really, thank you for your attention to detail and understanding that the tithe bucket isn't the back burner bucket that doesn't really matter, but it's something that you take really seriously. And if people are crying in the board meetings, it means you're doing something right.
Exactly. And they're being touched. They really are.
Yeah.
I mean, we get a lot of these. I mean, we get a lot of sad stories, We get a lot of very moving stories that, affect us. And, it's a joy to be able to help, though. So that brings joy.
Of course.
Yeah.
And again, it's the currency of giving, right? We don't measure our giving in the nonprofit world. We don't measure it in terms of financial profit, but we do measure it in terms of the satisfaction. And everyone's going to define this differently, so I won't define it for anyone. When we talk about measurable giving, we can measure in lots of different ways, but we do have to be thinking about the measurability. Okay. We do have to think about, well, what is this going to do? Why does this matter? And then look at it and then celebrate that when that happens.
And we do.
So thank you so much, Victoria. This has really been a fascinating conversation. And I think that there's a lot of food for thought here from people on the other side of the screen who can learn a lot, whether on the giving end or the asking end, because you're really handling both of those. And so keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Before we close, I want to thank Victoria, not just for her time, but for her transparency. One of the key takeaways from this conversation was her idea of being a sponsor, offering support even before the rest of the team has bought in. At the Nathaniel Foundation, sponsorship means more than funding. It means standing behind someone else's vision, lending credibility, opening doors, and saying, I believe this deserves to move forward. So, for this week's Giving Challenge, this week, let's look for an opportunity to sponsor someone else's vision. I'm not speaking about financial sponsorship. Instead, I'm referring to dedicating yourself to supporting someone else's success. You may want to recommend someone you believe in. Introduce two people who you believe should actually know each other. Publicly affirm a project or an initiative that deserves someone else's attention. Or quietly advocate for someone who doesn't have a seat at the table. This can be at work, among friends, or at the dinner table. Be attentive. Seek an opportunity to truly be there for someone else. Think of your sponsorship as a form of giving leverage or being a force multiplier. Help someone else move the needle in the right direction. So, as we close, I want to thank two Victorias. Dr. Victoria Sarvadi for her time and enriching insights, and our friend and our sponsor, Victoria Hurst, whose support has made You Are What You Give, the podcast, a success. And of course, thank you for tuning in to our miniseries, How Texans Give. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for listening. If this conversation resonates, please subscribe. It's a simple step that helps us share the word and build a community that values what we give more than what we take.